Hello everyone, I'm Pixa. I hope you had a good Halloween, and today I'm going to be explaining how I tell stories in The Sims 4 with a very easy to follow template that I have linked in the description down below, created by me for you and for me as well. And yeah, so let's get into it. I want to talk about this character on the screen really quickly, just so you know what you're looking at while I speak. This is Margot Whitlock. She is the main character of my series called A Cult in the Midwest, and she's going to be our muse for the first 10 minutes of the video while I explain to you what the template is so you can follow along with me while I explain what I've done with it. So the first section on the template is the title. Now, don't feel pressured to fill the entire page. A couple sentences work well. A couple words for the title also is better. It's very self-explanatory. Like I said, mine is A Cult in the Midwest. Yours can be anything you like, as long as you can understand it. If you're sharing it for an audience, make sure that the audience can understand as well. Next is gameplay type. So in The Sims, at least to me, there are two gameplay types: single family or rotational. So rotational is what I've chose for A Cult in the Midwest. I'm playing Margot, Nico, and Ellie, who are characters I will explain further in this episode. But that's who I'm playing. For you, you may choose to play a single family, and in that case, you just fill it with the single family's name or just the single family, and that's it. Pretty self-explanatory. But this is important because certain stories will require more characters involved, and maybe you want to play with more of them, and you just want to remember who is going to be in your rotation. Next is the main setting. Now, this one is a little more complicated and can get a little more intricate while you are explaining it. So for my story, it starts in 2014 in a small rickety town of Hollow Point that has around 105 residents. So it's a small town, which is important to the story. Each autumn solstice, the townsfolk start to prepare to throw the Blood Moon Vigil Festival. The festival is supposed to ward off vampires who are commonly thought to be most active in the fall, but it doesn't work. In fact, the rest of the town is so desolate that anyone who decides to skip the celebration is prime prey. Now, this is a setup for, the vampires in my story to really get their claws into the townspeople. Now, a bright-eyed woman named Violet notices the odd disappearances, sparkly skin, and smiles worn by a particular set of people in town. It's unfortunate she never got to finish her work, but that's what children are for, right? To carry a legacy? Her daughter Ellie stumbles upon her mother's old research and puts the pedal to the metal. In current times, the festival isn't taken as seriously, but Mayor Roger plans to change that with the help of his bright-eyed foster daughter, Zoe. The vampires of the town are a dwindling number, and they desperately need another festival and sacrifices to fuel them. Nico, a rebellious vampire with otherworldly intentions, is more than happy to help Zoe to get the festival going again. For selfish reasons, of course. However, a new vampire, Margot, accepts a deal to be turned by a doctor who pitied her mortality and fatal illness. Dr. Porter used nearly all his vampiric powders to bestow the gift of mortality onto Margot. Vampires like Nico and Doc are unashamed of their abilities and bask in their newfound talents, unlike Margot. Margot doesn't want to get the festival running. She struggles to fit in with her peers and battles her immortality like a leech on her skin. Will Margot come to face with her mortality? Will Nico revive the Autumn Festival? Or will Ellie expose a gate to another world? Now, while I was describing the setting, I made sure to include characters and how it affects them, and just a little sprinkle here and there of each main character that I want to have significant relevance. So that would be Nico, Ellie, Zoe, Margot. And I made sure they all tied into each other and they all had very distinct motives. Motives are very important because once you establish motives, you'll be able to give the characters, intention and purpose behind each action. Without motive, your characters will make decisions that kind of don't make sense, and then they don't feel like real people with real, things in their head. That's how you get characters who people can say are inconsistent. But you can also use that in a way to make characters feel purposefully inconsistent. That's, a way to create an interesting story as well. So you might be wondering, how did I come up with this setting? It's not the most creative setting in the world. It's a small town, but I was heavily inspired by Twilight. And I love Bella, don't get me wrong, okay? But I wanted to make her a little more interesting, and I wanted to see what I could do with my own, creativity in making a story like Twilight a little more. It is YA, it is young adult, but a little more gritty, a little more interesting. Bella is not the most interesting person in the world, okay? So I tried to make her a little more interesting. Margot is not Bella, but she's heavily inspired by Twilight. And, it's not a bad thing to take inspiration from other stories. As long as you're not just, blatantly beat for beat ripping it off. But I think the best stories come from inspiration from other stories. So yeah, take that as you will. And let's move on to the other section. The other section is other settings. So this would be things like homes, workplaces, parks, basically anywhere the characters can and will be. Secondary settings are important because they help set the mood and tone of the story, and things like lighting and location and weather can be conflicting to the story. Next is character stakes. The character stakes are important to lay out because you want to know the stakes of each character if they don't get their goals done. So for me, I just did Ellie's stakes because I felt like she had the most important stakes and I didn't want to make stakes for everyone else. But Ellie's stakes is if she doesn't expose the other side of the vampires, and the whole supernatural sort of underbelly, she will face a demise, and so will the rest of the town members, because the supernaturals are gonna take over the town because they're dwindling in numbers and they're really struggling. In this universe, in my head, supernaturals don't have much species conflict because they already struggle to blend in with society. And of course they have their hierarchies, but because there are so few supernaturals left, there isn't really time for them to fight and bicker about where they're gonna stay because they don't have anywhere to go. So the vampires, I see them as the most cocky and egotistical of the bunch because they can easily blend in with society and they're like charming and charismatic and all that. They want to turn Hollow Point into a supernatural paradise. So basically that means kick everyone to the can and move on. So yeah, that's the stakes of the story. Pretty high, pretty dramatic, but this can also be for, very sweet family gameplay where you don't want the stakes to be as intense and as grand. That's totally valid. I'm just a dramatic girl. So that's it. Next is character arcs. Now, character arcs can be a little complicated, but I just like to keep it short and sweet. And it's just meant to keep you on track during your gameplay for the motives and, headspace of each character, because it is very important to make sure that you are in the headspace of each character. So for Margot, I want her arc to be that either she chooses to, go with the dark side, or she chooses to rebel against the vampires and stop this whole paradise plan that they've got going on. And yeah, I won't tell you the rest of anyone's arcs because we'll be here all day. But that's pretty much Margot's arc. It's one sentence, very short, just so I know what I'm doing and I'm staying on track. So next we're going into character descriptions. First, we have the name of the character. When picking names, I just kind of go with whatever sounds good, but you can also have significant meaning behind the names. If they have cultural significance or they just mean interesting things. But I usually just like to go with what sounds like the character looks like. So that's what I went with for Margot. So Margot's backstory is she's always been struggling with anemia her entire life. Growing up, she kind of felt trapped in her own body that kind of betrayed her with her illness and sickness, making her feeling vulnerable and fatigued all the time. While other people got to, be young and frivolous and enjoy their lives, she was in the hospital with this kind of fragile existence that she hated. And she hesitated to, really connect with a lot of people and make a lot of friends during her time as a youngin because she felt like any time was her last time. But while Margot was in the hospital, nearly on her, axe bed, she met a vampire named Dr. Porter. Now, she didn't know that Dr. Porter was a vampire at first, but eventually he told her that she was. And because Dr. Porter fostered such a deep connection with Margot, he didn't want her to die. So instead, she kind of made a deal with, the big day. She made a deal with the big day. She was like, listen, I don't want to die on this table here today, so I'm making that deal. Turn me into a vampire. And then she was turned into a vampire. This gift is kind of like a cruel twist of fate. She accepted that she would gain immortality. She escaped the grips of her illness, but now she's forever tethered to, something that would weaken her, which is her own body. She's never going to get out of that body unless the sun blows up or she, gets hunted by a vampire hunter. But she kind of becomes a reluctant participant in the vampire clan's plans of taking over the town. And she starts to feel really, really guilty because the rest of her family also suffers greatly from anemia, specifically her younger sister and her mother. So she, as vampires do, have to watch everyone slowly crumble around them and grow old and or axed. So that really is a burden on her conscience, and she sort of feels guilty for choosing the quote unquote easy way out, and now she has to watch her members slowly fade away. But now she's left questioning whether she belongs in the world or whether she belongs with the vampires that she's now a part of. So that's Margot's backstory. For your own characters, you can go as in-depth as I did, more depth than me, or you can just strip it back a few sentences and keep it pushing. But I find the backstory is a really great place to explore different character types, different archetypes, and different people who would otherwise not exist in your story if you kind of just kept the same story beats that you always do. This is me calling myself out. But yeah. Yes, let's move on to characteristics. So for Margot, she is a loner, she is jaded, and she is burdened. Now, these characteristics don't have to exist in game. I can find other ways to show that through her traits. But these are just kind of guidelines for me, so I understand how she would behave in certain situations again. So yeah, that's very simple and straightforward. Next is her archetype. The archetype, she is a jaded maid. Having illness is kind of a key part of Margot's backstory and deepens her motivations for rebelling against her vampire lifestyle. It also adds a large layer of desperation to her character, making her vampirism feel like a gift and a curse. And, she escapes death. That new trait in the Life or Death pack. Oh, that's gonna be good. Anyway, she escapes death, but at the heavy cost of her conscience and watching her loved ones experience life, experience living. I also skipped a very important part. To me, I added a quote to each character. I know it's cringe, but listen, I'm enjoying myself. So the quote for Margot is, "People around me get the chance to live and acts. It's bittersweet." So that's pretty much her whole character. And yeah, next I have the style category. Personally, one of my favorite sections. I just love a good dress up DTI moment. But anyway, Margot's style is very influenced by grunge. She sticks to muted tones. I kind of kept her color palette in burgundy and black and green. Very simple. I don't want her to be stylish. I just want her to care about comfort more than fashion, and just really in her own vibes of comfort and sort of slight edge, because I felt like she'd be kind of edgy with her very brooding backstory. But yeah, mysterious and effortless. Cover girl. Okay. Next is the plot dynamics. This can get also a little more complicated. Feel free to skip this section if you feel like this is far too in-depth for you. In fact, feel free to skip any section if anything is too in-depth for you. But yeah, so we've got Margot's internal conflict. how she's constantly battling between, appreciating that she gets a second chance at life and hating the consequences of what that brings. Her strained relationship with others because she grew up with an illness. Margot definitely pushed people away in her life, like her best friend Zoe, who you're seeing on screen right now, or people like Zoe and Ellie, who were her childhood friends, but she just kind of didn't put as much effort into the relationships as she might have wanted to. And yeah, reluctant involvement in the vampires' clan goals. Margot doesn't want to be involved in the plans of turning the entire town into a supernatural haven, and she resists it at every step. So this is very important. She resists. At the beginning, she's resisting, but she can, slowly develop through, like I said, the character arcs. She can develop that she wants that, or she can develop that she doesn't want that. So yeah. And Ellie's investigation. So like I said before, Ellie is the daughter of Violet, who started an investigation on the vampires in the town. And as Margot is slowly, revealed by Ellie, there may be like really big tension between them, because obviously Ellie would know that she's a vampire with all that research. So it would be quite tense situation, because it'd be like, do you want to protect yourself, or do you want to do something that you might regret? You know what I mean? Anyways, yeah. Next is immediate family. I do like to flesh out the characters of my main character's immediate family, and also my side character's immediate families, but we'll be here all day if we go into each character's immediate family. So I'm just gonna skim over and you can kind of get the gist of it. So Margot's mother is Clara Whitlock. She's nurturing, but she's overwhelmed by the weight of her family's health struggles, and she's anxious and paranoid. Margot's father, he is practical and hardworking. He's also her stepdad, but he's very supportive and often feels the struggle of being a provider. He has a deep love for his family, but he struggles to express it with financial restraints and just money being so tight. So James is kind of the emotionally distant father who works too much. That's pretty much it. And Margot's sibling, Sam Porter, she's very rebellious. She's very, teenage dirtbag vibes, but she's also very, very sick along with her mother as well. So she's, rapidly declining, but she kind of spites Margot a little bit, jealous that she's suddenly gotten over her sickness, and she also admires her. She's like, if Margot can do that, I can do that, which is crazy because technically Margot didn't do nothing. She just got lucky, and that's gonna hurt for her to explain to her little sister, if she decides to, how she's living, and if her sister is even gonna believe her. So that's gonna be pretty fun for me to go through. But yeah, that's Margot, and that is the entire template gone through with my characters. So hopefully you learned how to fill the template out and you enjoyed listening to me talk about how I filled it out. All right, you've made it to the second half of the video where I explain how I tell stories through builds. Now, this apartment belongs to Nicholas Sullivan, a 20-something-year-old who became a vampire centuries and centuries ago in the small town of Ravenwood. Yeah, I'm very excited about Ravenwood, by the way. Anyways, so when he was turned into a vampire centuries and centuries ago, Nico was dealing with what I would like to call an extreme case of bullying, okay? He wasn't that rich. He was a peasant, and his entire family was peasants. So when he got the opportunity, a strange man came to him and was like, hey, do you want to be a vampire? Like, I'm trying to turn the entire town. Now, that vampire wasn't successful, but he did successfully turn Nico into a vampire. And, as a 20-something-year-old who faced severe scrutiny from his community just for being marginally more poor than everyone else, and being an orphan and not having much to his name after his parents went kaput, he spent a lot of his time just begging and trying to stay afloat with his younger sister. But now that he became a vampire, he was able to provide for his sister and really kind of use his vampiric powers to get what he needed done. So instead of being dirt poor, all of a sudden he had all these power, and, being weak for so long, he definitely felt like this was a good thing for him and a good change. And he is the type of vampire that really likes his new powers, his new control over the world, essentially. So Nico is very charming and very, classic brooding vampire who's very good with words and charismatic. He has a lot of insight and is super wise, which makes him a sort of natural leader because he is a master vampire. He's as high as they get because he's been one for so long. And he often clashes with the more traditional members who don't appreciate his, otherworldly tactics to dealing with life and whatnot. I want to stop the story real quick just to talk about how I'm decorating this. Nico does own a nectar business because, he's a vampire, and I feel like he would enjoy that nectar. Kind of looks like blood, and it's like the acceptable society way of having blood around his house, and nobody would know. Yeah, he owns a nectar making business, and that's why he has all this food and stuff up here because, he's making nectar and whatnot. He's not actually eating because he's a vampire, but you also need to have your fridge stocked and your house stocked if people come over and they're like, where's all your food? You could just say you DoorDash, but come on, let's be for real. Anyways, yeah, so that's also why he doesn't own a complete fridge, because he doesn't really need one. So it's easier to keep up appearances with a smaller fridge than it is a bigger one. I eventually put one in, but yeah, he's a nectar maker, and I thought that was interesting for him. And yeah, so meeting Margot for him is like a really refreshing surprise, and it's a reminder of how he initially struggled with his vampiric powers and how he had to grapple with the fact that he also had to watch his little sister, crumble beneath him. But he enjoys watching her learn to adapt, and, it almost rekindles memories of his first years as a vampire through watching and dealing with Margot. Now, although he may act like he doesn't care, he does, kind of sort of want to guide her towards embracing her vampiric lifestyle, because at the end of the day, she's now one of his, and he does feel a sense of obligation towards her just because she would help with his plans of taking over the town. There are only so many vampires. There's, they're dwindling numbers. They need everyone they can get. So he does feel obligated to sort of take her under his wing. So yeah, he's never the type to admit that, though. He would not. Anyways, so his key characteristics is that he's an experienced mentor, he's conflicted, and he's got sort of an attractive maturity. He's not conflicted with the wanting to take over the town. He's conflicted of how it may affect the other younger vampires, and if he wants to be a good role model or if he just wants to do what's best for the supernaturals. So that's kind of his conflicting. His archetype is that he's a chaotic mentor, and he's charismatic and, seasoned vampire. For his style, I find it really important that you eject the style of your characters into the style of their homes, because a lot of the times the way people dress reflects in the way of, how their homes are styled and what they can afford and all that jazz. So Nico is, like I said, he's kind of rebellious, a little edgy, but his nectar business is something really recent. He used to kind of just be a grifter and surf couch on women's couches because he's like super attractive. So they just kind of let him do his thing. He was a bum, okay? But he's decided in this century that he's not going to be a bum anymore. It just took him centuries and centuries. So that kind of shows his character. He finally got this place where he can afford to set up his little business and hopefully start to make money of his own instead of being a leech. So that's what I'm building right here in his living room. He's got a little office with this makeshift wall. This wall was actually built by Margot's dad, who is a carpenter. And I was like, hey man, I just need you to divide my living room into some space so I can have an office because I want one. And Nico's dad was like, okay. what kind of wall you want? He's like, just a wooden wall. That's it. So I think that shows how he doesn't really care about his, well, he cares about his surroundings. He likes nice things, okay? He just doesn't care for the theatrics of it all. He's more practical and likes to get to business. So he didn't care for the plaster. He's like, the cheapest thing you can put up. So that's what I did with that. This is me just doing his office, because anytime I have a sim who has a business, you definitely need an office space for them, because not only does he give you opportunities to build, you know, more stuff and give them more character, it's just a cute little nod to whatever their profession may be. So yeah, back to Nico's style. He kind of favors darker colors, slim pants, crisp shirts. He's very sleek in his appearance. I will insert some pictures of Nico here. I feel like I should do that, but he's modern and confident, and he's very sleek looking yet comfortable, which is a running theme throughout all these characters for some reason. But yeah, I'd like to allude to his mysterious nature, and he just kind of feels timeless. He's one of those people, you look at them and you're like, you know what? I feel like you could fit in any era. That's what I was going for with him. I don't know if I pulled it off, but I did what I could. So another note on Nico's office and sort of living space, you may notice that there's a lot of older items around, and some of the objects in his house just feel like they're not of the era. And that was on purpose. Like, for example, this typewriter on his desk is definitely something that I wanted to allude to his older past. I feel like Nico is kind of pretentious, and he would be like, listen, I don't like modern computers because they just don't feel as high quality. They don't feel like they did back in the day. And he just loves a good old-fashioned typewriter. I don't know if that makes him a hipster, because he doesn't give me hipster vibes, but definitely one of those people who are like, I don't want a modern fireplace. I don't want a modern computer. The only thing modern in my house is my stove and my fridge, which is also tying into his love for nectar making, because it's very traditional, and it's one of the only professions I can think of that isn't like heavily changed by technology, because things like smithing and even construction are changed dramatically throughout the years by just having the addition of technology. So I feel like he'd appreciate the simplicity of nectar making and the, let's say, the je ne sais quoi of it all. He appreciates the craft and how it's hasn't really changed much over the years. Now, I could be wrong about that, but I feel like stomping on grapes is pretty primitive. So, you know, that's my interpretation of it. Anyway, so I'm trying to keep his apartment sleek while still fitting the fact that he's broke and just got this place. And I feel like he's a stylish guy, but he's not like so stylish where his house would just look like it came out of a IKEA magazine. So it was interesting having to balance the two of those aesthetics together. Anytime I do build a house for a specific sim, I do keep a bunch of elements in mind. I never try to place anything that I think they wouldn't have unless, it's necessary. But I think I've gotten better at decorating for other sims. And here I am putting pictures of like his past life. I thought that was like his family or something. And yeah, I just want his office to feel really lived in. But I really like the pictures that I added that felt like they came from a past life and sort of alluded to his, experiences as a old vampire. Also, this trinket is also very cute. I really like the watches that I added because, again, I feel like he would have a bunch of stuff from his past life in his house. That's kind of the main theme. Hoarder with some... hoarder's dramatic. He's not a hoarder. He just has some items from his past. And yeah, I love this set by Around the Sims 4, by the way. The business CC set. So good. So amazing. And I use it in this build a lot. But I think I actually aged his computer even further. I don't know if I keep with that one. But yeah, he just prefers older technology. He doesn't have to be a typewriter, but that's why he doesn't have a classic computer, because he definitely could just have a laptop. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this build. Hopefully you got something out of it, and you kind of got some insight into my process more and into my headspace on how I go about designing spaces for characters through storytelling. My name is Pixa, and I'm gonna leave you here with the rest of the video, and I hope you enjoy. Happy simming. Bye bye.